The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Representatives from 23 different alien species sat frozen in their seats, staring at the empty podium where the human ambassador had stood just moments ago. The holographic message still hung in the air, its words burning into the minds of every being present. Ambassador. Catherine Shaw had delivered the message with a calm voice that somehow made it more terrifying. She had not shouted. She had not threatened. She had simply stated facts, as if reading a weather report. The United Earth Confederacy hereby terminates all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council. All treaties are canceled. All trade agreements are void. All human citizens will return to Earth-controlled space within 72 hours. This decision is final. Then she had walked out. No explanation. No negotiation, nothing. High Counselor Vethrak of the Zenthari Collective was the first to speak. His species had 4 arms and skin that changed color with emotion. Right now, his skin was pale white, the color of pure fear. "This cannot be real," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No species has ever left the Council. The benefits are too great. The protection is too valuable." Delegate Maressa of the Achillean Federation rose from her water-filled seat. Her people were aquatic beings with scales that glowed in different colors. Those scales were now flickering wildly, showing her confusion and panic. "Perhaps this is a negotiation strategy," she suggested hopefully. "Humans are known for their dramatic gestures. They must want something from us? More trade rights, perhaps? Better colony assignments?" The artificial intelligence representative from the silicate mines spoke next. Its voice was cold and mechanical, without any emotion. "We have studied human behavior patterns for 40 years. Our analysis is clear. Humans do not make empty threats. When they say something, they mean it. This is not a negotiation. This is a goodbye." The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several representatives began speaking at once, their voices rising in panic and confusion. The Sketh ambassador, a large reptilian being with sharp teeth and a powerful tail, slammed his fist on his desk. "We must stop them," he growled. "Send ships to block their departure. Force them to negotiate." Counselor Vethrak shook his head slowly. "You clearly have not studied human history. Their species has a saying. They would rather die on their feet than live on their knees. If we try to force them, they will fight. And humans are very, very good at fighting." This was true. Everyone in the chamber knew it. When humanity had first joined the Council 40 years ago, they had been considered primitive. They lacked faster-than-light travel. Their medicine was basic. Their technology was centuries behind the galactic standard. But they learned fast. Impossibly fast. Within a decade, human engineers had improved Council starship designs by 300%. Human doctors had found cures for diseases that had plagued alien species for thousands of years. Human soldiers had defended Council worlds against threats that more advanced species had fled from. The Void Swarm. Those terrible creatures from beyond the galaxy's edge had been pushed back almost entirely by human military forces. Humans had bled and died protecting worlds that were not their own, asking for nothing but respect and fair treatment in return, and now they were leaving. Counselor Vethrak turned to his aide, a young Zenthari named Keth Valium. "Contact Ambassador Shaw immediately. Tell her we wish to discuss this. Offer whatever she wants." Keth Valium hurried away, his 4 hands working frantically at his communication device. He returned 10 minutes later, his skin the same pale white as his master's. "The human embassy is empty," he reported. "Every human on Nexira Prime left 3 hours before the announcement. Their ships have already entered faster-than-light travel. They are gone." The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted at each other, pointing fingers and assigning blame. The Velerans blamed the Sketh. The Sketh blamed the Aquilians. Everyone blamed the Zenthari, who had led the Council for the past century. But Counselor Vethrak sat quietly, thinking. Humans were practical beings. They did not make emotional decisions. There had to be a reason for this withdrawal. A specific cause. His mind went back over the past few years. Searching for answers, there was the Veleran incident, of course. A Veleran patrol ship had fired on a human medical vessel, claiming they mistook it for pirates. 17 humans had died, including children. The Velerans had apologized and offered trade credits as compensation. But humans valued their people more than money. Trade credits could not bring back the dead. Then there was the colony dispute. Humans had applied for settlement rights on a beautiful world called Kepler-4 for to be. They had met all the requirements. But the council had given the planet to the Feluci instead. Claiming it was better suited for their agricultural needs, humans had accepted the decision without complaint. But Vethrak remembered the look in Ambassador Shaw's eyes that day. It was the look of someone keeping count. How many other incidents had there been? How many times had humans been treated unfairly, dismissed, or ignored? Vethrak realized with growing horror that he did not know. He had never bothered to keep track. Across the galaxy, the news spread like fire. On space stations and colony worlds, alien species watched in disbelief as human ships gathered and departed. There were no angry speeches, no dramatic confrontations. Humans simply packed their belongings and left. On Frontier Station Omega-7, a mixed community of traders and scientists, Commander Lucas Price oversaw the human evacuation. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 20 years on this station, working alongside alien colleagues. Building friendships he thought would last forever. Now he was leaving. And he could not explain why. A Xanthari dockworker named Thesa grabbed his arm as he walked toward his ship. She was young, barely an adult by her species standards, and her eyes were wet with tears. "Lucas, please," she begged. "Tell me what we did wrong. Tell me how to fix it." Price looked at her for a long moment. He had known Thesa since she was a child. He had taught her how to play chess. He had attended her graduation ceremony. She was like a daughter to him. "I am sorry, Thesa," he said quietly, "but this is not something you can fix. This is something your leaders must fix, and I do not think they know how." He gently removed her hand from his arm and walked up the boarding ramp. The door closed behind him, and Thesa stood alone on the empty dock. Crying in the council chamber, the arguing continued late into the night. But Counselor Vethrak had stopped listening. He was looking at a small photograph on his desk. A picture taken 20 years ago at a diplomatic reception. In the photograph, he stood beside a young human diplomat named Catherine Shaw. They were both smiling. Behind them, humans and aliens mingled together, laughing and talking like old friends. Vethrak wondered when that photograph had become a lie. He wondered if it had ever been true at all. The stars outside the chamber windows continued to shine, indifferent to the small dramas of mortal beings. But somewhere in the darkness, human ships were racing toward home, carrying with them the broken pieces of a friendship that the galaxy had taken for granted. The silence had begun, and the Galactic Council was only starting to understand what it meant. 1 week had passed since the human withdrawal. The Galactic Council was falling apart. Emergency meetings ran day and night. Representatives argued until their voices gave out. Messengers ran through the halls carrying reports of new disasters. And everywhere, on every world, the same question was being asked. Why did the humans leave? High Counselor Vethrak had not slept in 3 days. His skin had turned a permanent shade of gray, the color of exhaustion and despair. He sat in his private office, surrounded by data screens showing the latest crisis reports. The Feluci agricultural world was reporting equipment failures. Human-designed irrigation systems were breaking down, and no one knew how to repair them. Without those systems, the harvest would fail. Without the harvest, billions would starve. The Sketh military was reporting a shortage of engine parts. Human engineers had built their newest warships, and the manufacturing process was a mystery to everyone else. Without those ships, the border defenses would weaken. The Aquilian medical centers were running out of critical medicines. Human doctors had developed treatments for 17 different diseases. Now those doctors were gone, and no one could replicate their work. Every report told the same story. Humans had been everywhere, doing everything. No one had noticed how much they contributed until they stopped. Delegate Maressa entered the office without knocking. Her scales were a dull brown color, indicating deep worry. She carried a data tablet in her webbed hands. "Counselor, We have a bigger problem, she said. The Void Swarm has attacked 2 border colonies. Without human military support, our defenses collapsed in ours. Thousands are dead. Millions are fleeing. Vethrak closed his eyes. The Void Swarm were nightmarish creatures from beyond the galaxy. They consumed everything in their path, feeding on the energy of living worlds. For 30 years, human soldiers had held the line against them, fighting battles that other species refused to fight. Now that line was gone. What did the humans say? Vethrak asked weakly. Surely they will not stand by while innocent people die. Maressa shook her head. We have sent 17 diplomatic messages to Earth. They have not responded to any of them. Our ambassadors have been turned away at the border. The humans are not speaking to us. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Vethrak thought about all the times the Council had ignored human concerns, dismissed their complaints, overruled their requests. Every small insult, every broken promise, every human life sacrificed for political convenience, they were paying for those decisions. Now on the other side of the galaxy, in a quiet corner of human space, Admiral Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the border sensors. His crew worked silently around him, monitoring the chaos unfolding in Council territory. "Sir," said Lieutenant Sandra Wells, his communications officer, "we are receiving another distress call from the Xanthari. Colony on Fellows Prime. The Void Swarm has broken through their orbital defenses. They are begging for help." Cole's jaw tightened. He had friends on Fellows Prime, good people who had treated humans with respect and kindness. The thought of them dying hurt him more than he wanted to admit. "What are our orders?" Wells asked quietly. "Our orders are clear," Cole replied. "We do not cross the border. We do not respond to Council communications. We protect human space and nothing else." Wells nodded, but her eyes were sad. She turned back to her console, listening to the desperate voices calling for help that would never come. Cole walked to the observation window and stared out at the stars. He remembered the first time he had met an alien, a young Xanthari scientist who had been curious about human music. They had spent hours talking about Bach and Mozart, about the mathematics of melody and the emotion of harmony. That scientist had died 3 years ago. Killed by pirates while traveling through a sector the Council had refused to patrol. The Council had expressed condolences, but done nothing else. Human lives were cheap to them. Human deaths were acceptable losses. Now the Council was learning what it felt like to be abandoned, back on Nexira Prime. The Council chamber had become a place of accusations and blame. Species that had been allies for centuries were now pointing fingers at each other, searching for someone to hold responsible for the human departure. "It was the Velaran attack on their medical ship," shouted the Sketh ambassador. 17 humans dead, and you paid them with trade credits like they were broken furniture. The Velaran representative stood up, her face flushed with anger. "That was an accident. We apologized." "What more could we do?" "You could have punished the crew that fired the weapons," replied the Sketh. "You could have changed your patrol protocols. Instead, you did nothing and expected humans to forget." The Xanthari ambassador tried to calm the room. "Fighting among ourselves will not bring the humans back. We must find a solution." "There is no solution," said the cold voice of the Silicate Mind representative. "Our analysis indicates that human withdrawal is permanent. They have removed all personnel, all technology, all intellectual property. They have erased themselves from our civilization as completely as possible." The chamber fell silent. The implications were terrifying. Humans had not left in anger or haste. They had planned this for months, perhaps years. Every departure had been coordinated. Every piece of human technology had been recovered or destroyed. It was not a withdrawal. It was an amputation. A young Xanthari aide named Thesa stood in the back of the chamber, listening. She had grown up on a human space station, raised by parents who worked alongside human colleagues. Her best friend had been a human girl named Emma, who taught her to play basketball and helped her with her studies. Emma had left with all the other humans, and Thesa had not been able to say goodbye. She had tried to contact Emma through personal channels. But all human communication networks were closed to outsiders. Thesa thought about all the times she had heard council members speaking about humans, the casual dismissals, the jokes about their short lifespans, the assumptions that humans were useful tools rather than equal partners. She had always felt uncomfortable with those comments. She had never spoken up. None of them had. And now it was too late. The emergency session continued for hours, but nothing was decided. There were no easy answers, no quick fixes. The humans had woven themselves into every aspect of galactic civilization, and pulling that thread had caused everything to unravel. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, exhausted and frightened, Counselor Vethrek remained in his seat. He was looking at his communication device, reading a message he had received 3 years ago. It was from Ambassador Shaw, requesting a formal investigation into discrimination against human citizens. She had documented hundreds of cases, denied permits, unfair trials, violent attacks that went unpunished. She had asked for justice. Vethrek had filed the message without responding. He had been too busy with important matters to deal with human complaints. Now he read every word. Each one felt like a knife in his heart. The humans had warned them. They had begged for fairness. They had given the council every chance to do the right thing, and the council had chosen to do nothing. Vethrek set down the device and wept. His forearms wrapped around himself as sobs shook his body. He cried for the humans who had died without justice. He cried for the galaxy that was falling apart. And he cried for himself, for the leader who had failed everyone. Outside the chamber windows, the stars continued their ancient dance. But somewhere in that vast darkness, walls were being built between species that had once been friends. And the Galactic Council was learning, too late, the price of taking friendship for granted. 3 months after the withdrawal, the true scale of the disaster became clear. Dr. Samantha Reyes stood in the observation deck of Earth Station Genesis, watching the endless stream of data flowing across her screens. She was the director of the Human Integration Archive, a department that had once managed technology sharing with alien species. Now her job was very different. "The Felusi harvest has failed completely," reported her assistant, a young man named Christopher Lane. "Their emergency food supplies will last maybe 6 months. After that, famine." Samantha nodded slowly. She had expected this. The irrigation systems on Felusi worlds had been designed by human engineers using principles that no other species understood. Without maintenance, without updates, the systems had collapsed one by one. "What about the Aquilian medical crisis?" she asked. Christopher scrolled through his data. "Their hospitals are running out of the medicines we developed. They have tried to reverse engineer the formulas, but they keep failing. The Aquilian Science Council has officially admitted they do not understand how the treatments work." This was the great secret that the galaxy was only now discovering. Human technology was not just advanced, it was different. Humans thought in ways that other species could not follow. They made connections that seemed impossible, solved problems that seemed unsolvable. For 40 years, the Council had benefited from human creativity without ever understanding it. They had assumed that human innovations were simply improvements on existing ideas. They had never realized that humans were operating on an entirely different level. Now, without humans to maintain and improve their gifts, those innovations were breaking down, and no one knew how to fix them. Admiral Nathan Cole joined Samantha at the observation window. His face was tired, lined with the weight of difficult decisions. He had spent the last 3 months turning away desperate refugees and ignoring heartbreaking distress calls. "The Void Swarm has taken for more worlds," he said quietly. "The Council's defense line has collapsed completely. They are evacuating the entire Outer Rim." Samantha closed her eyes. The Outer Rim had been home to billions of people. Zenthari, Sketh, Aquilian, Felusi, and dozens of other species had built their lives there. Now they were running, fleeing from monsters that humanity had once held at bay. "Any response from the Council?" she asked. "It's the same as always. Begging, pleading, promising anything we want." Cole shook his head. "They still do not understand. This was never about what we could get from them. This was about respect. about being treated as equals rather than useful tools. Christopher looked up from his screens. "Sir, do you think we made the right decision? All those people dying? All that suffering? Could we have found another way?" Cole was silent for a long moment. Then he walked to a different screen and pulled up a document. It was a list of names, thousands of them, scrolling endlessly downward. "These are all the humans who died in council space over the last 40 years, he said. "Murdered by aliens who faced no punishment. Killed in accidents that could have been prevented. Sacrificed in battles that were not our concern. Each name represents a family that will never be whole again." He turned to face Christopher directly. "We tried talking. We tried negotiating. We filed complaints and requested investigations and begged for justice. Nothing changed. The council saw us as expendable, and they proved it again and again." Christopher nodded slowly, but his eyes were still troubled. He was young, too young to remember the early days when humans first joined the galactic community. He had grown up believing that the council was a force for good, that cooperation between species was humanity's greatest achievement. Now he was learning the truth. The council had never seen humans as partners. They had seen them as resources to be used and discarded. On Nexera Prime, the council was holding yet another emergency session. The chamber that had once held representatives from 23 species now held only 18. 5 species had withdrawn to focus on their own survival, abandoning the alliance that had protected them for centuries. High Counselor Vethrak stood at the central podium, trying to project confidence he did not feel. His skin was a mottled gray, shifting between exhaustion and fear. "We have received a report from our science teams," he announced. "After 3 months of study, they have concluded that human technology cannot be replicated. The fundamental principles are beyond our current understanding." Murmurs of despair rippled through the chamber. Some representatives began arguing immediately, refusing to accept the findings. Others simply sat in stunned silence, contemplating a future without human innovations. The Silicate Mind representative spoke in its cold, mechanical voice. "We have reached the same conclusion independently. Human cognition operates on patterns we cannot model. Their creativity is not merely impressive. It is alien to us in ways we never recognized." The irony was bitter. For 40 years, humans had been dismissed as primitive newcomers, lucky to have been accepted into galactic civilization. Now, it was clear that humans had been the ones providing the most valuable contributions, and no one had noticed until they stopped. Delegate Maressa raised her hand. "What about the young humans who grew up in council space? Surely some of them remained behind. We could ask for their help." Vethrak shook his head. "Every human has returned to Earth territory. Even those who were born here, who had never seen Earth. Even those who were married to aliens, who had children with alien partners. They all left." This fact had shocked the council more than anything else. There had been thousands of mixed families, humans who had built their lives among alien communities. The council had assumed these humans would stay, would serve as bridges between civilizations. Instead, they had chosen their own kind. When forced to pick a side, not a single human had picked the council. Back on Earth Station Genesis, Samantha Reyes was meeting with President Daniel Hayes via secure hologram. The president was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle voice that hit a core of steel. "How are our people adjusting?" Hayes asked. "Better than expected," Samantha replied. "The returnees are integrating well. Many of them are happy to be home, even if they miss their alien friends, and the ones who left families behind." Samantha's expression darkened. "They are struggling. We have counselors working with them around the clock, leaving their children, their spouses, their loved ones. It was the hardest thing most of them have ever done." Hayes nodded gravely. "I know. I have read the letters they sent before departing. So much pain, so much loss, and all because the council refused to treat us fairly." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I need you to prepare a report on council technology. Everything we learned from them, everything we improved or invented. I want a complete picture of what they gave us and what we gave them." Samantha already knew the answer, but she promised to compile the data. When she finished the report a week later, the numbers were stark. The Council had given humanity faster-than-light travel, advanced materials, and energy systems. In return, humanity had given the Council medical breakthroughs, engineering innovations, military strategies, and creative solutions that had transformed galactic civilization. By any measure, humanity had given far more than they received. The Council had gotten the better end of the deal, and they had still treated humans like second-class citizens. The report was classified at the highest level. Only a handful of people would ever see it. But those who did would understand why humanity had made its choice. As Samantha finished her work, she looked out at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there, billions of aliens were suffering because humanity had withdrawn. It was not fair to them. Most of them had done nothing wrong, but fairness had never been offered to humanity. And sometimes, the only way to teach a lesson was through pain. She turned off her screens and went home to her family, grateful that they were safe within human borders. The galaxy could burn for all she cared. Humanity had finally put itself first, and it felt right. 6 months after the withdrawal, Council intelligence made a discovery that changed everything. Agent Kira Lawson had been a human operative embedded in the Zenthari security services for 3 years. She had been one of the best, trusted with sensitive information, given access to classified files. When she departed with the rest of humanity, no one thought to check her office. It was a young Zenthari analyst named Thesa who found the data crystal hidden in a drawer. At first she assumed it was corrupted or trapped, some kind of revenge from a bitter spy. But curiosity won over caution. She plugged it into a secure terminal. What she found inside broke her heart. The crystal contained thousands of documents from the Council's most secret archives, meeting transcripts, intelligence reports, classified communications between senior officials. Every dark secret the Council had hidden for decades, Thesa read for hours, her scales turning pale with shock. She read about the 17 times the Council had denied human colonization requests. It's not because of regulations, but because other species wanted those worlds for themselves. She read about the hidden tariffs that charged human merchants 3 times more than anyone else. She read about the military assignments that sent human soldiers to the most dangerous missions, specifically to reduce their numbers. And then she found the document that explained everything. It was labeled Protocol 17 and marked with the highest classification level. The contents were simple and devastating. 3 years ago, the Council had begun secret negotiations with the Void Swarm. The extragalactic monsters had offered a deal. They would stop attacking the inner systems if the Council gave them access to the Outer Rim, specifically to the human colony worlds on the Outer Rim. The Council had agreed. They had planned to sacrifice human colonies to the Void Swarm, offering up millions of human lives to protect the core species. The plan was scheduled to begin in 2 years. After a gradual reduction of human military presence in the region, humans were going to be fed to monsters, and the Council was going to pretend it was a natural disaster. Thesa ran to High Counselor Vethrak with the crystal, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it twice. She burst into his office without permission, something that would normally result in severe punishment. But when Vethrak saw her expression, he knew something terrible had happened. He read the documents in silence, his 4 hearts beating faster with each page. When he finished, he sat very still for a long time. His skin had turned a color Thesa had never seen before, a deep purple that indicated profound shame. They knew, Vethrak whispered finally. The humans knew about this. How is that possible? Thesa asked. This was our most classified information. Vethrak laughed bitterly. We thought we were so clever, hiding our plans behind layers of security. But humans are not like us. They see patterns we cannot see. They notice inconsistencies we overlook. Somewhere, somehow, they discovered what we intended to do. He looked at the crystal again, understanding finally dawning. This was not revenge. This was evidence. Agent Lawson left this behind so we would know why they left. so we would understand what we had done. The truth spread through the council within days. There was no way to contain it, no way to spin it into something acceptable. The council had planned to commit genocide against humanity, and the humans had found out and left before it could happen. The reaction was explosive. 3 more species withdrew from the council immediately, disgusted by the revelation. The Sketh ambassador demanded the arrest of everyone involved in Protocol 17. The Aquilian delegation released a public apology to humanity, taking responsibility for their role in the discrimination. On Nexera Prime, riots broke out in the streets. Ordinary citizens, aliens who had lived and worked alongside humans for decades, expressed their rage at their own government. Signs appeared everywhere. Justice for humans. Bring them back. We are sorry. Yet apologies could not undo what had been done. And humanity was not listening in human space. President Daniel Hayes addressed the nation from the steps of the new Geneva capital. His face was calm, but his eyes held deep sadness. Many of you have asked why we left the council so suddenly, he said. Many of you have wondered what could have driven us to abandon allies and friends. Today, I will tell you the truth. He explained Protocol 17 in simple, clear terms. He showed the documents authenticated by human intelligence agencies. He described exactly what the council had planned to do to human colonies. We did not leave because of insults or unfair treatment, Hayes continued. We left because our so-called allies were planning to feed us to monsters. We left because the galaxy that claimed to welcome us was secretly plotting our destruction. His voice grew stronger. Some have called our withdrawal cruel. Some have said we should have tried to negotiate, to seek justice through proper channels. But how do you negotiate with people who have already decided to kill you? How do you seek justice from a system that considers your lives worthless? He paused, looking directly into the camera. We did not start this conflict. We simply refused to be victims. And we will never apologize for choosing to survive. The speech was broadcast across the galaxy, translated into every alien language. For the first time, the council species heard humanity's side of the story. And many of them, perhaps most of them, found themselves agreeing. On Frontier Station Omega, now abandoned and slowly falling apart, a single Zinthari maintenance worker named Kethfall listened to the broadcast on a damaged communication system. He had refused to leave when the station was evacuated, choosing to stay and maintain the systems as long as possible. Kethfall had worked alongside humans for 30 years. His best friend had been a human engineer named Marcus, who had taught him how to repair quantum regulators, and who had saved his life during a reactor accident. Marcus had left with all the other humans, but not before pressing a small object into Kethfall's hands. It was a photograph of the two of them, taken at Kethfall's wedding 20 years ago. Remember the good times? Marcus had said, his eyes wet with tears. Remember that not everyone forgot what friendship means. Now Kethfall held that photograph and wept. He wept for Marcus and all the other humans who had been betrayed. He wept for his own leaders who had committed such terrible crimes. And he wept for the galaxy that had lost its best and brightest because of greed and fear. Back on Nexera Prime, Counselor Vethrek had called an emergency session to address Protocol 17. The chamber was half empty now, with many species having withdrawn or sent only minor representatives. Those who remained looked broken and ashamed. I will not make excuses, Vethrek began. I will not try to explain or justify what was planned. Protocol 17 was a betrayal of everything the Council claimed to represent. It was evil, and I am ashamed that it was conceived under my leadership. He took a deep breath. I have submitted my resignation, effective immediately. All officials involved in Protocol 17 have been removed from their positions and will face criminal charges. The protocol itself has been destroyed, along with all related plans and documents. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative. But I know this is not enough. Words cannot undo what was done. Actions cannot bring back the trust that was lost. The humans are gone, and they have every right to stay gone. His voice cracked with emotion. All I can say is that I am sorry. I am sorry for every human who died without justice. I am sorry for every human who was treated as less than equal. I am sorry for the monstrous plan that we created to solve our problems at their expense. He stepped down from the podium for the last time. May history judge us as we deserve, and may humanity someday find it in their hearts to forgive us, even if we do not deserve it. The chamber remained silent as Vethrak walked out. There was nothing left to say. The council had committed an unforgivable crime, and now they had to live with the consequences. Outside, the stars continued to shine, indifferent to the suffering below. But somewhere in that darkness, humanity was watching and waiting. The truth was out now. The question was, what would come next? 50 years had passed since the human withdrawal, and the galaxy was a very different place. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self. Only 12 species remained as members, down from the original 23. The Great Alliance that had once ruled 1,000 worlds now struggled to maintain order in 100. The Void Swarm had been pushed back, but at terrible cost. Without human military genius, the Council had been forced to sacrifice entire systems to slow the enemy advance. Billions had died. Dozens of worlds had been consumed. The scars would take centuries to heal, but something else had changed too. Something unexpected. The Council had reformed itself. Slowly, painfully, over decades of difficult work, they had rebuilt their civilization on new principles. Equality for all species. Justice without exception. Transparency in all government actions. They had learned from their mistakes. They had become better. New High Counselor Thesa stood at the central podium, the same position where she had once watched Vethrak confess to Protocol 17. She was old now, her scales faded to a soft silver, but her eyes still held the fire of youth. Today marks the 50th anniversary of the human withdrawal, she announced. 50 years of separation. 50 years of rebuilding. 50 years of hoping that someday the bridges we burned might be rebuilt. She paused, looking around the chamber. I am pleased to announce that humanity has accepted our invitation for diplomatic talks. For the first time in half a century, human representatives will set foot on Nexera Prime. The chamber erupted in applause and cheers. Representatives wept openly, overwhelmed by emotions they had carried for decades. This was the moment they had worked toward, dreamed of, prayed for. 3 days later, human ship appeared in Nexera Prime's orbit. It was a small vessel, elegant and efficient, nothing like the massive warships that had once defended Council space. A single shuttle descended to the planet's surface. Landing at the same dock where Ambassador Catherine Shaw had departed 50 years ago, the delegation that emerged was small. Just 5 humans, led by a woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair. Her name was Elizabeth Shaw, granddaughter of Catherine, and she carried herself with the same quiet dignity that her grandmother had possessed. Thesa met her at the dock, surrounded by council representatives and media drones broadcasting to every corner of the galaxy. The 2 women stood face to face, human and Zenthari, separated by a gulf of history and pain. Ambassador Shaw Thesa said formally, "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome you to Nexera Prime. We are honored by your presence." Elizabeth studied her for a long moment. "High Counselor Thesa, my grandmother spoke of you often. She said you were one of the few council members who truly understood humanity." "I tried to understand," Thesa replied, "but I did not try hard enough, soon enough. That failure cost us everything." Elizabeth nodded slowly. "Yes, it did." They walked together through the streets of the capital city, past crowds of aliens who watched in awed silence. Some reached out, as if to touch Elizabeth, to confirm that humans were real, that they had truly returned. Others held signs of welcome, messages of apology, expressions of hope. Elizabeth acknowledged each gesture with a small nod, but her expression remained guarded. 50 years was a long time. Trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. The negotiations took place in a chamber specially designed for the occasion. The walls were decorated with murals depicting the history of human council relations, the good times and the bad. Nothing was hidden, nothing was sanitized. "Before we begin," Thesa said, "I want to show you something." She activated a holographic display. showing a massive memorial complex on the outskirts of the city. Thousands of names were carved into black stone walls, stretching for kilometers. Every human who died in council space before the withdrawal, Thesa explained. Every victim of violence, accident, or injustice. We found their names, learned their stories, honored their memories. This memorial is visited by millions every year. Elizabeth's composure cracked for just a moment. Her eyes grew wet, her hands trembled slightly. My grandmother's sister is on that list. She was killed by pirates when I was a child. I know, Thesa said softly. Her name is on the Wall of Honor, along with all the others who died serving the council. We remember them. We will always remember them. The negotiations continued for weeks. There were difficult conversations about boundaries, trade agreements, military cooperation. There were arguments and setbacks. Moments when it seemed like everything would fall apart. But there were also moments of connection. Elizabeth and Thesa discovered a shared love of music, spending evenings listening to compositions from both human and Xanthari traditions. Council representatives shared meals with human diplomats, rediscovering the simple pleasure of breaking bread together. Slowly, carefully, a new relationship began to form. On the final day of negotiations, Elizabeth addressed the council chamber. Every seat was filled, every representative present. The entire galaxy was watching. 50 years ago, my grandmother stood in this chamber and ended humanity's relationship with the council, Elizabeth began. She did so because you had broken our trust in the most fundamental way possible. You had planned to sacrifice our people to save your own. The chamber was silent, every word landing like a weight. We have spent 50 years healing from that betrayal, building our own civilization, our own alliances, our own future. We have proven that we do not need the council to survive. We do not need your technology, your resources, or your approval. She paused, letting the words sink in. But survival is not the same as thriving. In isolation, while safe, is also lonely. Humanity has always been at its best when we connect with others, when we share our gifts and learn from different perspectives. Her voice grew warmer. Over the past weeks, I have seen something I did not expect. I have seen genuine change. Not just words, but actions. Not just apologies, but reforms. The council that betrayed my grandmother is not the council that stands before me today. She looked around the chamber. Meeting the eyes of each representative, my grandmother told me, before she died, that humans do not hold grudges forever. We are practical people. We believe in second chances, in the possibility of redemption. She said that someday the council might earn back our friendship. She hoped she would live to see that day. Elizabeth smiled sadly. She did not. But I believe she is watching now, from wherever she has gone. And I believe she would be proud of what we are about to do. She extended her hand toward Thesa. On behalf of the United Earth Confederacy, I propose a new treaty between our peoples. Not an alliance, not yet, but a beginning. A chance to rebuild what was lost, to create something better than what came before. Thesa took her hand, her grip firm and warm. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I accept. And I promise, on my honor and the honor of all my people, that we will never betray your trust again. The chamber erupted in celebration. Representatives embraced each other, tears flowing freely. Outside, crowds that had gathered to watch the broadcast began cheering, their voices rising in a wave of joy that spread across the planet. Elizabeth and Thesa stood together at the center of it all. Two women from different species, different generations, different histories, but in that moment, they were united by something stronger than their differences. Hope that night. Elizabeth stood alone on a balcony overlooking the city. The celebrations continued below, lights and music filling the streets. She held a small photograph in her hands, an image of her grandmother taken on the day she was appointed ambassador. "We did it, grandmother," she whispered. "We found our way back. It took 50 years and more pain than anyone should have to bear, but we did it." A soft breeze stirred the air, carrying the sound of laughter from the streets below. Somewhere in the distance, a child was singing a song that Elizabeth recognized. It was an old human lullaby, one that had spread across the galaxy before the withdrawal. Apparently, it had survived. It's passed down through generations of aliens who remembered and cherished human culture. Elizabeth smiled and looked up at the stars. The same stars that had watched over her ancestors, that had witnessed the best and worst of galactic civilization. The galaxy was vast and ancient, filled with wonders and dangers that no single species could face alone. Humanity had tried to go it alone, and they had succeeded. But success was not the same as happiness. Now, finally, they had a chance at something more. A chance to be part of something greater than themselves while still being respected for who they were. It would not be easy. Trust would take time to rebuild. Mistakes would be made. But for the first time in 50 years, the future held promise instead of fear. Elizabeth tucked the photograph into her pocket and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, new opportunities. But tonight, she allowed herself to hope, and across the galaxy, for the first time in half a century, humans and aliens dreamed the same dream, a future where friendship was not a weakness to be exploited, but a strength to be celebrated. The reckoning was over. The healing had begun.